Now that you know your way around the Spark AR Studio, let's get you started on creating a simple effect where you can place a 3D object in the world space. On Spark AR, you can import your own 3D objects or choose from a large set of 3D objects in the AR library. Spark AR Studio also includes some built-in objects, the face mesh, null objects, 3D text, and planes, all of which will help you create different kinds of effects. Let's learn about some of them before we start using them. 3D objects. General 3D objects that can be added into any project. You can edit them, change their materials, add interactions, logic, and animation. In case you don't have your own 3D objects created, you can choose from a huge range in the AR library. Some 3D objects can include bones and joints, which you can use the patch editor or scripting to animate. They can also have materials, textures, and animations baked into the file itself. The face mesh. Put simply, the face mesh is a 3D model of a face. It works in combination with the face tracker in Spark AR Studio to create a surface that reconstructs someone's expressions. Once you have added a face tracker and face mesh to your project, you can create mask effects, add retouching, or change the shape of the face. Null objects. A null object is an object that can be used to group other objects. It doesn't have a shape or mesh of its own, but it can be manipulated in the 3D space exactly like a 3D object. Objects placed under a null object are known as its children. The children take on the properties of the null object. For example, if you rotate the null object along any of the axes, the children will rotate too. Null objects are particularly useful for adding secondary animations to an object, or to make sure a group of objects have exactly the same position in the world space. Plane. In Spark AR Studio, a plane is a flat 3D object that can be positioned at any depth, that is, at any distance from the camera within the scene. Because the plane is a 3D object, you can use the manipulations to change its position, scale, and rotation. You could use a plane to position a 2D image or texture into 3D space easily. 3D text. In Spark AR Studio, you can add 3D text to your effect. This adds in a text element that has a height or depth in the 3D space. You can even add your own custom fonts to the text. But remember that only the American English characters will be shown and won't be translated to another language automatically. One other thing to note about using 3D text is that it cannot be used in an effect that's meant to go on Instagram. Adding 3D objects in Spark AR. Let's learn how we can add 3D objects into the effect and manipulate them. Before we begin, grab this template we have created. The template contains a pre-made setup that will let you understand how 3D works inside Spark AR and also shows you a tiny bit of what's possible on it. Inside the folder, open the file worldtemplate.arproj. Once you open the file, this is what you will see. In the scene panel, you will see an object called drag here. This object is a null object. It's used to hold another object inside in a specific position in the world space. Now let's add a demo object that you got with the project. In the scene panel, click on Add Object and select 3D Object. Navigate to the folder where you downloaded the project and add the file head.glb. Now, this object should add itself into the scene. But as you can see, it's not exactly where you want it to be. In this case, it's taking up the entire camera view. Let's fix that. Grab the object you just added and drag it down inside the Drag Here group, above the Delete Me object. And now, it should be placed almost perfectly within your camera view in the simulator window. Now, delete the Delete Me object by selecting the object in the Scene panel and pressing the Delete button. Let's understand how this works. The null object, Drag Here, has a group of objects under it which are its children. Although the child object has its own values for scale, rotation and position, these are overridden by the parent, which in this case is the Drag Here null object. You can verify this by selecting a child object and looking at its properties in the inspector. You will notice that some of them aren't highlighted. The whole Drag Here group is a part of another group called the Group Anim block. This controls the rotating animation that you see in the scene, which in turn is a child of the Plane Tracker object. So in summary, the parent-child relationship between objects in the scene let us easily control the position of the objects without having to go into each one separately. Now let's try moving the head now. First, pause the effect by clicking on the pause button in the toolbar on the left. Now, select the null object and you should see it highlighted in the scene. The 3 axes should appear and now you can move it around to your desired position in the scene. Try switching between scale, rotation and position on the top of the viewport panel and move the head wherever you desire. Great! You have learned how to add a 3D object into the scene and transform it. Try adding more things into the scene like another object from the AR library, or you can upload your own as well. Happy creating!